Hey students, it's April 6th. How are you out in COVID-19 zombie apocalypse land? Anyway, I'm going to be talking to you about Stoicism, which is the topic for April 6th in our Philosophy 101 class. And Stoicism, so what's that all about? It's the next philosophical movement in Western philosophy, the next philosophical movement. So this is just after the period of the classical era of Greek philosophy, which is Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. That spells spa, by the way. Socrates, S, Plato, P, and Aristotle, A, S, P, A, spa. That's kind of like how it kind of proceeds in time. So Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle are the classical period of Greek philosophy. But now we're moving a little bit more forward in time. This is now the year 300 or so. BCE, 300 years before the time of Jesus of Nazareth. And this new philosophy movement starts with a guy named Zeno, Zeno of Citium. And he's from this island right off the coast of Lebanon. So if you guys kind of know where the Holy Land is in the Mediterranean, I'm going to probably attach a little JPEG to kind of show you the map of Cyprus. So it's just off the coast of Lebanon, near what is modern day Israel, and it's in the Mediterranean. So he kind of imports this new philosophy, Zeno of Citium, that's his name. He imports this new philosophy into Athens, and then within a couple of decades, it's kind of spreading throughout the Greek and the Roman world. There's a lot of great Stoic philosophers in world history. So people like Zeno, and also a slave who was got himself freed at some point. His name was Epictetus, and we have writings from him, and we also have the writings of a famous Roman emperor who was Marcus Aurelius, who was also a Stoic. So anyway, the word Stoicism comes from the word stoa, which is kind of like a little patio area in Greek temples. So as you go through the little columns, you know Greek temples all have these little columns. I'll probably import another little JPEG of a Greek temple. And the little porch area just inside the columns provides shade for people in the Greek sun. It's very hot in Athens, very hot in Greece in general, especially in the summer. 110, very humid, very humid. And so, shade is very a nice commodity. So there was an area that these philosophers used to meet in, kind of like this porch area of Greek temples in the Acropolis. And they started to be known for this little area that they hung up. They hung out in the stoa, in the porch area, stoa. So they were like called porchists or porchism, kind of a weird. So that's what Stoicism relates to. Anyway, so Zeno, what's the basic idea about Stoicism? So in order for me to tell you a little bit about Stoicism, I have to tell you a story. And this story comes from my wife's side of the family. I kind of tell it every semester. And I'm going to be speaking about a family kind of family, extended family on my wife's side of the family. I'm going to call the dude who was the husband in this marriage. So I'm going to be talking about a marriage. So the husband, I'm going to call him Shrek. And I call him Shrek because, Shrek's ugly. You don't look at Shrek and think, leading man type, and this guy's very handsome. So anyway, bad teeth. This guy that I know in Mexico on my wife's side of the family, big, thick Coke bottle lenses. The kind of thing where when you turn to the side, you can see how thick the lenses are. Them lenses could stop the bullet. It was like bulletproof glass. This guy had bad teeth, bad eyes. He was like about 5'6". Shrek's big actually, but so this guy's actually kind of a pocket-sized Shrek, but ugly, not much to look at. But this one dude that I'm talking about, I'm calling him Shrek. He had game. It's really interesting because whatever he did really, really well. For instance, he was a triple black belt in judo, and he had a dojo in his home. His father was interesting. His father said, "Look, I can't give you much in life, but I'm going to let you build your own house on my land." His father had like a big little parcel of land in Mexicali. And in Mexico, I don't know if you know this, but families will sometimes say, "Hey, don't move out. Just build your house right here on our little little property that we have, and you guys can, when you get married, you can build your little home. And that's what Shrek did. He took advantage of his father's invitation to build a little house, and he did. He built his own house. He was in his 20s. He was going to the UABC, the University Autónoma de Baja California, UABC. He was a business major. And so he built his own house by the time he was like 21, 22, and he used the living room of his house as a dojo. In other words, all his judo students would come into the living room, and there was no furniture inside his living room. There was no, coffee table or anything. So you'd go in, and it would be nothing but padding on the floor and mirrors. That's where he would conduct his judo classes. And that's where he ended up marrying his wife, who's on my wife's side of the family. Okay. So he married her, and she was his student. She was his judo student. So one day, who knows, he was throwing her to the ground in a judo move, and she must have looked up at him from the padding on the floor, looked up in his eyes and said, "My man, nobody throws me like that." So she looked up at him. He wasn't much to look at, but Shrek was accomplished. Not only was he this triple black belt, he also was a professional photographer in his 20s. I mean, this guy he used another room in his house. He was a bachelor, so some of the bedrooms that he built, one of the back bedrooms was a photography studio, and people, when they wanted to come over to get, photographed for their marriage, maybe graduation photos, quinceañera. Those of you not understanding Spanish, like when you're 15 years old, you're debutante, when you're coming out, and you kind of like are the lady, and you're coming out in this big ballroom, kind of anticipating your transition into adulthood. They call it a quince años, 15 years. He would do those kind of things. He was a pianist, and I'm not talking about like he could play a few tunes on the piano. No, he was a concert pianist, and he could do Chopin and Mozart. I've seen him do performances at Bellas Artes, which is the cultural center in Mexicali, and I mean, he would do Rachmaninoff and Beethoven and stuff. So he was a concert pianist. So when this woman on my wife's side of the family fell in love with Shrek, she wasn't falling in love with him for his looks, but he had something else. He was accomplished. It was just whatever he did really, really well. And so they got married, and in Mexico, you start having family right away. So they had one kid, right away, and then 2 years later, here comes the second kid. Then, 5, 6 years in the marriage, here comes the third kid. They're now into their, 15, 16 years of their marriage, and now she's got her fifth kid, maybe 18 years or so into the marriage. She's now got her fifth kid in the oven, bun in the oven. And Shrek used to invite his students over to the house for their judo lessons, but he also had a room in that same house where he had a piano room, and it was all kind of acoustic, baffling, so that he could have a piano student in his room, but not bother the rest of the family. In other words, he was giving lessons, and he would give lessons to old retired people, to young students, grammar school age students, high school students. And Shrek had this one student who was about 18 years old, high school student. He was 17 years old, and the wife started to kind of feel uncomfortable about this woman, this young lady, because the way they would interact, you know how you women out there, you got that sixth sense, you got that little radar that goes, dude, you start picking up stuff. And she said to Shrek, "Hey, I don't like that little vibe. I don't like that way she kisses you on the cheek before you leave." In Mexico, there's a little cultural thing that you can do, very formality. You kiss one side of the cheek, and that's kind of acceptable. But the wife wasn't having it, and she challenged Shrek, and Shrek basically said, "Oh, come on, man, you're tripping." In Spanish, "Estás tripeando." You're tripping. And so nothing happened. But then, who knows? A month later, 2 months later, the 411, the call comes in, and Shrek's wife gets this call that Shrek was seen in his car with this young lady, parked by the side of a park. And, hey man, the call came in. And now Shrek's wife is really upset. She pulls him aside and says, "Look, man, I don't want you to be playing me. I got to know if there's something going on." Of course, Shrek says, "Come on, man, it's ridiculous. It's 120 degrees in Mexicali in the summertime. I saw her standing by the bus stop. You know, you can't expect that. Um, you can't expect that. I wouldn't offer her a ride and stuff. I know her family and stuff. It's ridiculous. Like, come on. Now, Shrek didn't address why they were parked and talking kind of privately in the car. He didn't kind of gloss over that. And she wanted to believe him, like nothing going on. So she talked to him, and, but she still wasn't quite satisfied because by this time she was already alerted. So Shrek's wife goes to the young girl's family, and she knocks on the door, and they don't know her. And she sits down, and I don't know the details, but she basically tells the father of this young girl and the mother, hey, your daughter and my husband, you know, I don't know what's going on, but I'm uncomfortable with it. And I just want you to know that, I want you to talk to your daughter and tell her that this is a serious thing. And I consider this very, very serious. And please talk to your daughter about this. So I'm sure that the parents talked to this young lady and said, hey, man, this is Mexico. You don't do that. You don't interfere in somebody's family, man, and stuff. So that should have been it, right? Just squash that. That should have been it. So is that the end of the story? Oh, hell no. That's not the end of the story because bottom line is about 2 or 3 months after that, I could back up from the computer and kind of show you stuff back up from the computer. And the young girl is pregnant. So Shrek's got a baby coming along too. He's got a child that's about to be born with his wife, his fifth. And now he's pregnant. He's got this 17 or 18-year-old high school student, or just kind of maybe in preparatoria, um, with a baby. So this sends shock waves through this Mexican family. They got brothers and brother-in-laws, and this stuff, man, it's serious in Mexico. It's very serious. Family honor is, this kind of stuff. So anyway, Shrek moves out with this young lady, gets an apartment with her, and takes up with her. Meanwhile, Shrek's wife has the baby, and Shrek never even shows up to the delivery room, man. He wasn't going to show up and confront her family and her father, his father-in-law. No way, man. He's just staying away from that situation. So the family's just in an uproar. Anyway, a couple of months after that, the baby's, growing and stuff like that. And it's the holidays. My wife says to me, you know what? We got to go. It's family time. We need to go and see her. And I'm going, man, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. It's going to be messy. I don't want to go there. And my wife says, well, she made pozole. And I said, oh, well, you should have told me. You should have said she made pozole. Anyway, so yeah, that was a bribe. So I went there, and it was sad. You think when a woman has a baby, usually they've got all that maternal fat on them. They're nursing, they're kind of plump. None of that, man. She was absolutely um, weakened and big circles under her eyes. She looked like she had lost weight. You wouldn't even think that she had delivered a child because she looked like she was concentration camp survivor. Really, it was just really sad. So, bottom line is that a couple of times during the breakfast that we were having, she was absolutely crying and weeping. And at one point, my wife kind of kicks me underneath the table, like say something to her. You're a philosophy major. That was the interpretation. Let me turn off this phone. Sorry. That was the interpretation. Tell her something, man. Break out some wisdom. You're supposed to know. And I was like, I didn't know what to say. I was like, um, life is suffering, and this will pass. Whatever I said, it was some weak stuff, and my wife must have looked over at me like, really? That's all you've got? The face that she made at that point was like, Gene, in Spanish, we say, no, man, just like, come on, dude, really. It was really bad. So I couldn't say, I just didn't know what to say. So now I'm going to bring my story home. So what would a Stoic say if I had been a true philosopher who was steeped in Stoicism? If I had been a Stoic philosopher, I would say what you're going to end up, the same thing that you'll end up finding when you read this little chapter in the book on Stoicism, which Zeno of Citium started, which is that all things happen for a reason. You and I cannot really alter our fate. There is a divine logos meaning an intelligence in nature and in the universe which orders all the seasons, death and rebirth, clouds, rainfall, evaporation that gets back into the atmosphere that then, collects, comes back down on Earth, the birds, the bees, termites kind of breaking down branches and fungi and roots and, all kinds of bacteria and things like that that work in synchronicity. And the Stoics interpret that there is a wisdom going on in all things, but not just in nature, but even for human beings. And you and I, if we're Stoics, we understand that there are some things in our control. In other words, if we hear COVID-19 information, if we hear, we didn't get accepted into a college, we applied for a scholarship and we didn't get it, romanticism, whatever it happens, something doesn't work out. We can't control the things that happen outside of us, but we can control our reactions to them. That's what we can control. But bigger things outside of us, when we're born, when we die, our parents, our socioeconomic status, at least when we're children, our brothers and sisters, we don't have any control over that. Our parents, we don't have any control. We are kind of riders on the wheels of fate. We don't really have any control. So a Stoic understands that there's some things that we can control our passions, we can control our reactions to things, but the ultimate things we cannot control. So, and we have to stop fighting this terrible feeling that we can control something when in reality, we really can't control things. We can only control our reaction to things. So let me get back to the Shrek story, because the weird thing about it is that this woman was crying at the breakfast table saying, nobody will ever love me. I have 5 children, because I don't know, it somehow came out, you'll move on, something good will happen. And she was going, who will love me? And I remember she started crying about that. Who will take me? I'm, in my 40s. Who will love me? And the weird thing about it is that about 3, 4 years later, a man who was 10 years younger than her, a guy who had his own landscaping business. I mean, he did, you know, landscape for golf courses and, new housing developments. They put in the lawns, the sprinkler systems. He could come in and put a little, patio in your backyard, like with flagstone and, a pond which has different layers of water cascading. Like people who come in and do landscape engineering and landscaping. He did all of that. And so he had 5 or 6 people working on his crew. He met this woman, loved her, fell in love with her. They met at church and fell in love with her. And he said, look, I'll take all of your children. I love all your kids. I love you. But I've got to have kids with you too. That's my condition. I've got to have a child with you. And she must have thought, man, I'm in my 40s. This factory is closed down, bro. There's no more children. They're going to be pumped out of this factory. And he just said, man, I love you, but I got to have kids with you. I feel like I want to have a child with you. And she did. They had 2 more kids. They did. It's incredible. And they love each other to this day. I went to their wedding. Shrek moved on. It's kind of crazy because the family ended up not hating Shrek. Shrek ended up divorcing that young gal that he married. This 17-year-old gal, they had 2 kids together. So Shrek had another 2 kids. And anyway, it's a long story. But anyway, Shrek moved on. He's with another woman now. And so the dude, that's his way. But the woman ended up actually not knowing what fate would bring her, but kind of eventually kind of like just giving up her control. And in fact, fate did bring her another man who ended up marrying her and being a father to her 5 children, as well as the father to the 2 new children that she had. So now that doesn't always happen in Stoic reality. There are things in which we die and we never see the fruit of all this waiting that we did. For instance, there's people that were born and died in slavery, and their condition never changed. They were born into slavery as children, and they died slaves. And there's countries right now in Syria, civil war. I mean, some children have never known anything other than civil war and upheaval and terror. If you're born in Palestine today, you've never known anything other than the Israeli occupation. And that's going on in countries all over the world where there's extreme poverty and it never seems to change. So, bottom line is, we don't always see the fruits of what we're waiting for in life, but a Stoic believes that there is a plan for all things, and what we need to do is be in control of our reactions to things and have the belief that things can get better. They also got this other thing about suicide where some elements of Stoicism, not all Stoics, but some Stoics believe that if your internal disposition was ever so rattled so much that you could not accept a slow death that was coming on, you were losing all your faculties and even your bowels, and you were just like in such a dependent state. I mean, Stoics would sometimes say that it would be permissible for you to take your life and to end your suffering. So not all Stoics do, but there is one element of Stoicism that's like that. In many ways, I see kind of like an element of, not in the suicide part, but of acceptance and resignation as something real similar to what you see in Buddhism, because we don't have control, but we can have calm acceptance of our um, fortunes. So anyway, that's a quick thing on Stoicism. I'll be talking about St. Anselm for the Wednesday lecture. So until then, I'll catch you guys soon. Orozco out.